Welcome to Puzzle Proof. Join us as we unravel today's captivating story and solve exciting puzzles together. Get ready to engage your mind. Let the journey start. Nero Wolfe and the Heir and the Letter. Chapter 1. The Pale Envelope. It was a Tuesday morning, and Nero Wolfe had just informed me, without lifting his eyes from a fresh volume on tropical fungi, that he would not be seeing any clients for the rest of the week. His exact words were, "I require uninterrupted immersion." That lasted 40 minutes. At precisely 10:42 a.m. the doorbell rang. I had been in the kitchen sampling Fritz's new apricot scones, pure dynamite, by the way, when the chime cut through the brownstone. Wolfe, as expected, didn't budge. I wiped my hands, brushed a few crumbs off my vest, and went to see who thought interrupting Nero Wolfe's solitude was a good idea. She was tall, late 20s, with carefully set ash-blonde hair and a grey wool coat that whispered, Fifth Avenue. Her face had the kind of polished stillness that only came from wealth or trauma. In one gloved hand, she clutched a cream-coloured envelope. No purse. No smile. "I need to see Mr. Wolfe," she said, her voice low and composed. I gave her the standard routine. Wolfe didn't entertain drop-ins, especially before lunch, and especially not when he was communing with mildew spores. She didn't blink. "My name is Alice Renshaw. This is about my father, Charles Renshaw." That earned her a beat of silence. Charles Renshaw had been the head of Renco Publishing, a man who knew how to weaponize words and wasn't afraid to bankrupt competitors to do it. He'd dropped dead in his study 2 years ago, officially a heart attack, unofficially maybe karma. I stepped aside. "Come in." Once seated in the office, she handed me the envelope. It wasn't sealed. Inside was a single sheet of thick paper, the kind favoured by lawyers and people who like feeling important. It was typewritten, old typewriter, not printer, and the ink had smudged in 2 places. The tone was as smooth as a scalpel. "You always said truth came with a price." "Well, darling, I'm here to collect. You know what I want. I suggest you find a way to give it to me before someone else does. M." She watched me read it, her posture frozen. I looked up. "This came from your father's things?" She nodded. "I've been clearing out the upper floor of the estate. His old files, letters, boxes no one's touched in years. I found that in a folder marked miscellaneous, private. I wouldn't have thought much of it, except last night I got an anonymous message slid under my door." She handed me a second slip of paper, folded twice. On it was scrawled in black marker, "Some things should stay buried, unless you want them dug up with you." I whistled low. "You call the police?" Number the I didn't want this becoming public. My family name. I held up a hand. "Adult, you're here for Wolfe." She hesitated, then nodded. "I don't even know what any of this means. I just have a feeling. Something's not right." "Something usually isn't," I said, then buzzed the button under Wolfe's desk. "Yeah?" "Client. Threats, dead father, maybe blackmail, might even get interesting." Wolfe grunted. "Pass. Bring her in 15 minutes. With coffee, I poured her a cup. Black, no sugar. She didn't drink it. 15 minutes later, Wolfe entered from the plant rooms, enormous and glowering. He took one look at her, and then the letter, and then said, "Sit, explain." She repeated her story, this time slower, and Wolfe didn't interrupt. When she finished, he let out a quiet sigh and reclined deeper into his custom-built chair. "Miss Renshaw, I detest blackmail, not merely for its cowardice, but for its sloppiness. It is seldom artful, yet your situation presents something else." "Meaning?" she asked. "I have no interest in ghosts. If your father was being blackmailed, that is history. However, He tapped the envelope with a finger thick as a bratwurst. If this extends to the present, then I might find it worth investigating. Mr. Goodwin will proceed with preliminary inquiries. She rose. Should I pay a retainer? Yes, 2,000. Mr. Goodwin will take care of the paperwork. I saw her out and collected the fee, then returned to Wolfe, who was sniffing the envelope. Old ink, Remington or Smith Corona, he muttered. Want me to start with the family? I asked. He nodded. Judge Renshaw, the brother. See what he thinks of letters from the grave. I changed into something less neutral and more mobile, then cabbed it to the Renshaw estate uptown, a 5-story monument to inherited arrogance. The butler tried to block me. I smiled and slid past him. Judge Henry Renshaw was in his study, a neat room with too many books and not enough personality. He looked up from behind a glass of rye and frowned. I was told you were coming, he said, though I don't recall inviting you. Miss Renshaw asked us to look into something delicate. You want to be helpful? I want to be left alone. Alice is prone to drama. He reached for his drink. If she found something, it's probably nothing. My father had hundreds of old correspondences, authors, mistresses, lunatics. You think the letter's fake? Number, I think it's ancient history. Let it die. Would be easier if someone hadn't threatened her. His glass stopped halfway to his lips. Then he drained it in one gulp and stood. You can show yourself out. I did, but not before noting a framed picture on the mantel, a family shot from 10 years ago. Charles, Henry, Alice, and a woman I hadn't seen before. Red hair, sharp jaw, standing just slightly outside the rest. Back at the brownstone, I reported in. Brother's tight-lipped. Either he doesn't care, or he's worried we'll find something that bites him too. Wolfe nodded, eyes closed. And the picture? The redhead might be your next lead. Could be M. Pfui, Wolfe muttered. Find her. I was halfway to the coat closet when the phone rang. I picked up. The voice on the other end was dry and irritated. Goodwin? This is Inspector Kramer. You're involved in something. Technically always true. He cut me off. A woman was found dead in her apartment, throat cut. Ava Lyman, used to work for Charles Renshaw. Know the name? I did. She'd been the publisher's secretary years back. Discreet, smart, and the one person who knew where the real bodies were buried. Figuratively, at least. So what's the connection? I asked. She got a visitor last night. No forced entry, no robbery, just a clean kill. I didn't need Wolfe to tell me that wasn't a coincidence. Anything else? One more thing. Her typewriter's missing. Back in Wolfe's office, I laid it all out. Ava Lyman's dead, murdered. Whoever visited her last took her machine and whatever she knew. Wolfe's lips thinned. You see? This is no longer academic. Someone is erasing history. With blood. He leaned forward, his bulk casting a shadow across the desk. We will continue, and now we will find the one who killed her. Chapter 2. The Broken Ribbon. The next morning, I woke up early enough for the sunrise, but I didn't bother looking. After what happened to Ava Lyman, I didn't expect the view to be pretty. Fritz had made eggs, sourdough toast, and something with black garlic that I didn't have time to enjoy. Wolfe was already in the office, settled into his throne and glaring at nothing in particular. When he's irritated, he doesn't speak. He huffs like a bull sizing up a matador. I dropped a fresh copy of the Gazette on his desk, folded to the Metro section. Third column. Former secretary found murdered in East 67th apartment. No names mentioned, but the facts were accurate enough. The typewriter, though, that detail was conveniently omitted. She was killed clean, I told him. No forced entry, no signs of struggle. Somebody she knew, someone who got close without raising alarms. Wolfe grunted. The typewriter? Gone, like it never existed. Kramer says they're checking pawn shops and collectors, but unless the killer's an amateur, they've already destroyed it. Who identified the body? Landlord, said she hadn't paid rent in 2 weeks. He went in with the super and found her in the study. No blood trail, no mess, just her, the chair tipped over, and the smell. Wolfe made a face. He had an iron stomach for deduction, but bodily realities he left to mortals. I slid the pale envelope toward him. I think we need to know what she typed, maybe even who she typed for. You think she typed that blackmail letter? I think someone thinks she did, I said. And now she's dead. Wolfe finally picked up the envelope again and stared at it like it had insulted his sense of order. M, he murmured. Who is M? That's what I'm going to find out. He gave a slow nod. Proceed. Take the car. When Wolfe tells me to take the car, it means the case has officially elevated from annoying to profitable. My first stop was the New York Manuscript Collectors Club, a dusty corner of Midtown where men with brittle glasses and brittle fingers gathered to discuss ancient paper like it was religion. Ava Lyman had occasionally transcribed for them on the side, light editing, rare typing jobs, things like that. If anyone knew her old machines, it would be them. I asked for the president, a pipsqueak named Harold Quigg, who looked like he had been born with ink on his hands. Yes, yes, Ava worked for us, he chirped. Reliable girl, quiet. Do you know if she owned a typewriter, a personal one? Quigg blinked. Remington noiseless, Model 7, original ribbon. She wouldn't let anyone else touch it. Still have it? He frowned. Last I saw it was 3 weeks ago. She was using it in the side room to type a letter for someone. A woman. Red hair, older. Looked like she didn't belong in Midtown. Bingo. You know her name? Number Ava never introduced us, but she paid Ava in cash and left quickly. Seemed twitchy. You have cameras? He looked offended. This is a literary club, not a casino. Of course. I left my card in case the ghost of Emily Dickinson stopped by, then headed to the diner on 74th, where Ava used to have her weekly lunch dates. According to a waitress named Joni, Ava's usual Tuesday partner was an older woman named Carla, rode in a dark Plymouth, wore gloves even in August. Another match. I showed Joni the old Renshaw family photo I'd snapped from their mantel, pointing to the redhead. This her? She nodded. That's her. Carla something. She liked rye toast and didn't tip. Now we were cooking. I made a detour to the DMV and thanks to a $20 handshake, narrowed down the Plymouths registered to women named Carla in Manhattan. There were 3. One stood out, Carla Voss, registered in Chelsea, aged 62, former journalist, freelance editorial consultant, Ava's killer or just her client. I went to Carla's building, a brownstone wedged between 2 art galleries. The mailbox was stuffed. I buzzed twice, no answer. I rang the landlord's number posted on the wall and got a groggy voice. She's not home, he said. Hasn't been in days, but her lights are on. That didn't sit well. I'm a private investigator, I said. There may be a connection to a homicide. I need access. A pause, then a sigh. Apartment 3B. I'll be down in 5. When he opened the door, the hallway stank of dust and something worse. Not death, but neglect. Carla's apartment looked lived in, but abandoned. A half-finished cup of tea sat on the side table. Her typewriter, a battered Olympia, rested on a desk with a fresh sheet of paper in the roller. The page was blank, but the ribbon had been torn out. No sign of her. The landlord leaned in. She doesn't disappear like this. She ever get visitors? Sometimes. Odd crowd, literary types, one guy with a limp. But she always told me if she was leaving town, didn't this time. I left him with instructions to call me if she returned. The missing woman angle was tightening the noose. Carla had vanished, Ava was dead, and both tied back to Renshaw and the mystery letter. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was at his desk sipping beer and glancing over typeface samples. I briefed him, ending with Carla's disappearance. "She had the means to type the letter," I said. "And she's missing." "Or hiding," Wolfe added. I agreed. "The blackmailer or the next victim?" That is the pivot on which this turns. We were still chewing on that when the front doorbell rang. I went to get it. It was Alice Renshaw. Her eyes were red. Her coat was unbuttoned. "Mr. Goodwin," she started, voice cracking. I helped her in, sat her down. Wolfe emerged after a long sigh. "Miss Renshaw," he said. "What now?" She swallowed hard. "My brother is dead, Henry." Silence. I didn't move. Wolfe didn't blink. She went on. "He died at dinner tonight, at the estate. It was just us, my mother and the housekeeper. The doctor said it was poison, arsenic, from the wine." She looked at us both. "I think someone wants to end the Renshaw line." Wolfe spoke slowly. "2 deaths, 1 missing woman, and now a poisoned judge." I said what we were both thinking. "We're up to our necks, aren't we?" Wolfe nodded. "And the water is rising." Chapter 3. Wine and Shadows. If the Renshaw estate was cold the last time I visited, this time it felt like a mausoleum. The front door opened before I could ring. A woman in a navy dress and no makeup stood stiffly behind it. Alice Renshaw. "This way," she said quietly, stepping aside. I followed her through the grand marble foyer to a drawing room filled with crystal vases, Persian rugs, and silence that clawed at the air like static. You could practically smell the tension baked into the furniture. "He died there," she said, pointing to a high-backed leather chair by the fireplace, after the first sip of wine. I scanned the room. Clean, tidy. A tray on a side table held 4 wine glasses, 3 empty, 1 untouched. The bottle, an open Merlot, stood beside them. Who poured the wine? I did. Who picked the bottle? Henry, from the cellar. And who drank? My mother, Henry, myself and our housekeeper, Greta. But Greta barely touched hers. Where is everyone now? Greta's upstairs resting. My mother's been sedated. The doctor's still here. The police came and went. They'll be back tomorrow with a full team. You should have called me first. I did? I had to admit, she was right. I took a look at the bottle. Standard vintage, but the cork had been reseated, awkwardly. It smelled normal, but you don't sniff arsenic. You die from it. Who else knew dinner was happening? No one outside the house, she said. It was a private meal. Henry insisted. That meant whoever poisoned the wine either lived there or had access like a ghost. I asked to see the cellar. It was beneath the east wing, tucked behind a locked iron gate that Alice opened with a brass key from her pocket. The room inside was cool and dry, lined with dark wood racks, a few cobwebs, more reds than whites. I scanned the rack Henry had pulled the wine from. You touched anything down here since he died? No. Mind if I do? She stepped back. I pulled a handkerchief from my pocket and lifted a second bottle from the same rack. This cork had also been disturbed, then reset by someone who didn't take the time to do it right. Looks like someone tampered with more than one. Alice didn't respond, but I noticed her hand tighten around the railing. You know anyone who'd want your brother dead? She hesitated. Henry had enemies. Old business grudges. He was ruthless, but no one who'd do this. No suspicious visitors recently? I've been here all week. Aside from you and the police, no one's come or gone. That sounded wrong, and too neat. Mind if I speak to Greta? Alice nodded once, then disappeared up the stairs. 5 minutes later, she returned with the housekeeper. Greta Schultz was in her 60s, round and ruddy-cheeked with careful eyes. She looked like she'd seen every storm, but never said a word about them. "Mr. Goodwin?" she greeted me. "Alice said you had questions." "Just a few. Tell me about dinner." I set the table. Miss Alice cooked. Mr. Henry fetched the wine. We sat at 8. I drank 1 sip and left mine. I never liked red. "Did you see him open the bottle?" "Number." He brought it in already opened. "Any arguments during dinner?" "Not loud ones." "Meaning?" "Mr. Henry said something about too many secrets in the house." Miss Alice said, "Don't start that again." Mrs. Renshaw cried a little. That was all. "You clean the glasses?" "After the doctor left, I rinsed them. Didn't polish." That meant fingerprints might survive, if the cops were lucky. "Anyone come to the house earlier that day?" "No visitors." "Carla Voss?" The name hit her like a slap. She looked at Alice. "Tell him," Alice said. Greta looked back at me. "Yes, a week ago, she came by, red hair, wanted to speak with Henry. He refused to see her." "What did she want?" "She said something about a manuscript, something he owed her. She left angry." That was something. Carla had been to the house, and Henry had shut her out. I returned to the brownstone and laid it all out for Wolfe. He listened without looking up, his eyes fixed on a thick book titled Botanical Poisons, a European reference. "So," I concluded, "Henry chose the bottle?" Alice poured the wine. Greta barely drank hers. "1 bottle was poisoned. Another, maybe?" Wolfe grunted. I continued. "Carla Voss came by the house last week, talked about a manuscript, got turned away. That makes her a suspect. That makes her a missing suspect." He finally looked up. "The killer is narrowing the circle. Ava first. Now Henry. Both were obstacles." "Obstacles to what?" "Revelation." I paced. "You think Ava knew who wrote the blackmail letter, and Henry may have known too?" "Not merely known, he may have written it." That stopped me. "You think Henry was the blackmailer?" "It fits. Access to the files, motive, money, leverage, perhaps revenge, and then he is silenced." "But then who poisoned him?" "Someone with more to lose." That narrowed the list. At 8:30 p.m. the doorbell rang again. This time it wasn't Alice, it was Carla Voss. She stood in the doorway, soaked to the bone from the sudden rain, hair wild, eyes rimmed red. Her lips trembled, not from cold. "I need to speak to Mr. Wolfe," she said. "You're late," I replied. "People are dying." "I didn't kill anyone." I let her in and took her coat. Wolfe emerged, silent and watching. She sat down, clutching her handbag like it held her last breath. "I didn't send that letter," she said. "I was asked to deliver it. By Heir Renshaw." Now that was new. "Explain," Wolfe said. 2 years ago he came to me with a typed page and a favor, said he needed someone to send it anonymously to his father. I owed him, so I agreed. I used Ava Lyman's typewriter to do it. She didn't know why. Why not use his own machine? "Too traceable," he said. "And now?" "Now Henry's dead. Ava's dead. I'm scared I'm next." Wolfe steepled his fingers. "What was in the manuscript you mentioned?" "A memoir. Charles Renshaw's memoir. Unpublished. He'd been writing it secretly, dictating it, I think, to Ava. It names names, details affairs, shady business deals, even deaths covered up. It's dynamite. And where is it?" Carla's voice dropped to a whisper. "I think Alice has it." Chapter 4. Secrets in the Cellar. The next morning began the way most good detective days don't, with Carla Voss still parked in our guest chair, nursing black coffee like it was morphine. She hadn't gone home, hadn't slept, and looked like someone waiting for a bomb to finish ticking. Wolfe wasn't thrilled. He rarely tolerated guests who outlasted Fritz's breakfast service, and Carla was working on hour 10. But something about her fear, raw and genuine, made him keep his mouth shut. Finally, after wiping her lips with a trembling hand, she stood. "I've told you everything I know. If Alice has that memoir, it's not just a book. It's a loaded gun." I walked her out. Rain still clung to the sidewalk like it had a personal grudge. Before I shut the door, I asked, "Why didn't you mention the memoir when I visited your place? I wasn't sure you'd believe me. And now?" She hesitated. "Now I'm not sure I'll live long enough to regret it." When I returned to the office, Wolfe was seated with his eyes closed, fingertips pressed against each other like a man meditating on a particularly ugly truth. "She's telling the truth," he said, without looking. "She left out chunks of it." "Yes, but the core stands. Henry wrote the letter, Ava typed it, Carla delivered it." "So what was Alice doing with it?" "Precisely the question you must now ask her. I phoned Alice and requested a meeting, not at her place, not at ours, neutral ground. She suggested the Conservatory Cafe at the New York Botanical Gardens. It was public enough for safety and private enough for uncomfortable truths. I arrived first and waited among the orchids, which made me briefly sentimental for Wolfe's own jungle upstairs. Alice entered wearing sunglasses, a beige coat, and a look that could turn champagne flat. "I suppose you want to talk about the memoir," she said, as she sat. "Smart guess." She adjusted her gloves. "I found it last week. It was in the wine cellar, tucked behind an old crate of Bordeaux, wrapped in oilskin, like someone was hiding a map to buried treasure." "Did you read it?" I skimmed. Enough to know my father was not the man we thought. It talked about people he ruined, women he kept, and... She paused, drawing a careful breath. His plan to manipulate the inheritance. He was going to cut Henry out, completely. Said he considered him unfit. That was new. Did Henry know? I think he suspected. Maybe Ava told him. Maybe he read an early draft. Either way, I believe the letter was his way of confronting my father. Blackmail? Leverage. Henry liked having the upper hand. And now he's dead, Ava's dead, Carla's hiding, and you've got the book. I burned it. That dropped like a hammer. You what? I burned it in the fireplace, page by page. I didn't believe it, not for a second, but she held my eyes without blinking. If it was a lie, it was an Oscar-caliber performance. Back at the brownstone, I gave Wolfe the highlights. She claimed she destroyed the memoir. She lies? Thought so. Then find it. How? The estate's locked tighter than a judge's jaw. Break it open. Wolfe didn't mean that literally, of course. His idea of breaking and entering involved court orders, loopholes, and occasionally a well-timed distraction. But mine was faster. That night, while the city settled into its usual chaos and Wolfe attacked a duck with prune sauce, I took a cab up to the Renshaw estate. Alice was out, confirmed by the butler, who didn't recognize me and didn't need to. I wore a tan overcoat, slouched my hat, and said I was there to check the cellar temperature on behalf of a wine broker. Sounded ridiculous, worked anyway. Once inside, I took the same route Henry had used on his last night, down the east stairs, past the boiler room, into the chilled air of the wine cellar. I carried a flashlight with a red filter, less glare, less suspicion. I searched every crate behind the Bordeaux rack, and after 15 minutes of dust, splinters, and one unfortunate spider, I found it. A thick, leather-bound manuscript wrapped in oilskin, not burned, not even creased. I didn't read it. That was Wolfe's job. I just slid it into my satchel and made my exit the way I came. No alarms, no witnesses, but I wasn't 2 blocks away when I realized something was wrong. My cab had a tail. A black sedan, nothing flashy, but it had followed us since the turn onto West 80th. I gave the driver a nod and had him swerve left across traffic. The sedan followed. At the next light, I jumped out and cut through an alley on foot. The sedan didn't stop, but someone inside had wanted to see where I was going, and more importantly, what I had. When I got back to the brownstone, Wolfe didn't need me to say a word. He saw the manuscript in my hand and exhaled like a man reaching the summit of a long climb. "Sit," he said. We read. The next 2 hours were silence broken only by the occasional hiss of disbelief. Wolfe read, I listened. The memoir was worse than we'd guessed. Charles Renshaw had outlined scandals that would have shattered 3 lives, dismantled 2 careers, and likely sent 1 person to jail. Among the revelations, an illegal settlement with a former employee who died under suspicious circumstances, an affair with Carla Voss that had produced a secret child, stillborn, an embezzlement scheme involving Henry, and a family foundation that never filed its taxes. Most damning of all was the implication that Ava Lyman had acted as a ghostwriter, but was threatening to reveal everything unless she received a payout. "This is the motive," Wolfe said, "the origin of all deaths, the beginning of this sordid line." I looked at him. "You think Ava tried to cash in?" "I think she tried to protect herself, and failed." "Henry?" "Panicked. Then someone panicked harder." "Carla?" Wolfe shook his head. "Number. She feared the truth, but she didn't kill for it." "Then who?" He lifted a single finger and pressed it to his lips. "Not yet." At 2 a.m., while Wolfe finally closed the manuscript and Fritz washed out our coffee cups, I checked the front hallway camera. Wolfe had installed it 6 months ago after someone dropped a dead chicken on the porch as a message. The footage showed what I expected, and one thing I didn't. At 1:12 a.m., a dark figure approached the stoop. They didn't knock. They didn't ring. They slid something under the door. I retrieved it. A plain white envelope. Inside, a single sheet of paper, typed, "Stop looking, or you'll join the others." No signature. But Wolfe didn't need one. He studied the letter and said very softly, "The killer is desperate. They've made their mistake." I leaned in. "You know who it is?" Wolfe's mouth curled, not quite a smile. "I do." Chapter 5. A killer's signature. The next morning, I woke to the scent of fresh bread and death threats. Fritz had made rye rolls with whipped honey butter, but the note from the night before was still on the table next to my plate, typed, unsigned, and politely suggesting I stop poking around unless I wanted to end up like Ava and Henry. Charming. Wolfe hadn't touched his breakfast, which meant he was thinking. Thinking hard. When Wolfe skips buttered rye rolls, you can bet something is simmering hotter than the stovetop. "I believe," he said finally, "we have been too focused on the message and not the messenger." Meaning? "The typewriter, Mr. Goodwin. We've been searching for the origin of the original letter. We must now find the source of the latest one." I got it. The blackmail letter had started the fire, but this new note was fresh gasoline. "I'll visit some of the usual places," I said. "Stationery shops, pawnbrokers, repairmen, anyone who sells, fixes, or hoards old Remingtons. Go quickly before the trail cools." He paused, then added, "Take your gun." When Wolfe says that, he doesn't mean it casually. I started at Kepler's Type and Stationery down in the West 30s. They'd been selling ink and ribbon since the Hoover administration, and the owner, Mr. Kepler himself, still wore sleeve garters and smelled like brass polish. I showed him the note. "Model 5 Remington," he said immediately. "Ribbon a little dry, slightly misaligned a key. Someone's using an old beast." "You sold anything like it lately?" He scratched his chin. 2 weeks ago, a woman came in looking for fresh ribbon and correction tape, said she was fixing up an old machine she found in her father's attic. Description? Tall, brown coat, gloves. Didn't give a name? I slid him a photo of Alice Renshaw. He squinted, then nodded. That's her. I remember because she was picky about ink. Wanted the kind used in legal offices. That was all I needed. Alice had the typewriter, she was still using it. And she had lied about destroying the manuscript. I called Wolfe from a payphone on 6th. She sent the warning, I said, typed it herself. Expected, he replied. Return at once, bring your wits. That last part was always assumed, but I appreciated the reminder. When I got back, Wolfe had already arranged for Alice to visit. She arrived wearing the same beige coat, but now she looked like it was wearing her. She walked slower. Her eyes flicked everywhere but toward Wolfe. He didn't rise, didn't blink. Miss Renshaw, he said, you are in danger of burying yourself with the truth. She stiffened. I told you everything. You told us nothing, Wolfe cut in, sharper than usual. You still have the memoir, you have the typewriter, and you typed the threat. She froze. Then, slowly, she sat. Fine, she said, almost whispering. Yes, I wrote it. But I didn't kill anyone. Wolfe steepled his fingers. You wrote the note because someone asked you to? Number, because I thought you were getting too close. I didn't want you to uncover what's in that manuscript. Then you are protecting someone. A long pause. Yes. I leaned forward. Who? My mother. She looked up, and this time her voice didn't tremble. It cracked. She killed my father 2 years ago. He didn't die of a heart attack. He took atropine. Wolfe's brows twitched. She poisoned him? Yes, after she discovered what he'd done to Carla, to his own son. She found the original manuscript. She confronted him. He laughed. And so she killed him? She said she slipped the poison into his bourbon. It was quick. No one questioned it. I leaned back, whistling. But that doesn't explain Ava or Henry. No, she said. That's why I think someone else has read the memoir. When she left, Wolfe sat in silence for 3 full minutes, then reached for the manuscript. He flipped to a bookmark section near the end. There, in a line written in Renshaw's precise, brutal style, was a paragraph about his real heir. If Henry fails me, I shall consider Alice, though she is weak, too like her mother. The estate must go to one with strength. The only one with steel in his blood is the boy I lost with Carla. Wolfe tapped the line. There, the missing piece. You think someone else knows this? Someone who thinks they're the rightful heir? Possibly, or someone who sees Alice as unworthy. The killer is circling her, removing obstacles. But why now? Why not years ago? Because the memoir remained buried, until now. I checked my watch. Want me to tail Alice? Number let her move freely, but call Kramer. Tell him to be here by 7. And invite all the players. Carla, Greta, Miss Renshaw. Even her mother? Number, she has done enough. At 7 o'clock sharp, everyone gathered in the office. Carla sat near the fireplace, her hands folded tight. Greta stood, nervously fingering her apron hem. Alice remained silent in the corner. Inspector Kramer, bless his impatient heart, stood with arms folded and a scowl sharp enough to peel wallpaper. Wolfe rose, a rare thing. He spoke, slowly. 2 murders, a missing memoir, and a threat sent to my doorstep. At the heart of all this, a family secret and a document meant to stay buried. He turned to Alice. You feared scandal? Understandable, but lies do not erase guilt. She looked away. Then Wolfe turned his gaze to Greta. You, madam, played nursemaid to an empire of shadows. You knew what Charles Renshaw had done. You knew about the poison. You hid it. Greta stiffened. I only wanted peace. And you had it, until Ava Lyman reopened the past. Wolfe turned to Carla. You were used. You carried the first letter, unaware it would start a chain of blood. Finally, he looked at Alice again. And you lied to protect your mother, but in doing so, you nearly doomed yourself. A beat passed. Kramer exploded. Wolfe, you going somewhere with this or just giving a eulogy? Wolfe didn't even blink. The killer, he said, is the one person who had access to every part of this story, who knew the house, knew the manuscript, and saw themselves as the rightful heir. A person who resented Ava for knowing too much, Henry for being first in line, and Alice for trying to bury the truth, he pointed. To Greta Schultz? Gasps followed. Greta stumbled backward, shaking her head. No, You poisoned Henry, Wolfe said. You rinsed the wine glasses, but avoided drinking yours. You had access to the cellar. You preserved the manuscript to use it later, not destroy it. I was trying to protect the family. You were trying to elevate yourself through their ruin. Greta collapsed into the armchair, breathing like a broken bellows. Alice covered her mouth. Carla looked like she might faint. Kramer stepped forward. That true, Greta? She didn't answer, didn't need to. Kramer nodded. Let's go. After the door shut behind them, Wolfe sat. He poured himself a beer and didn't speak for several minutes. Finally, he murmured, Truth is not a luxury. It is a weapon. And in the wrong hands, he let the rest hang. I watched him, the manuscript now sealed in an envelope on his desk. You want me to burn it? He shook his head. Number, file it. Why? For the next war. Chapter 6. The Third Glass. For a day and a half, it looked like Greta Schultz was the end of it. Inspector Kramer made the arrest with just enough satisfaction to remind us he still didn't like being shown up by Wolfe, even if the collars stuck. The papers ran a quiet story on the Renshaw family tragedy. Estate poisoning tied to family scandal. No names, no scandalous details, just enough smoke to suggest a fire had burned through one of Manhattan's oldest publishing dynasties. Wolfe refused every reporter's call. I refused most of mine. By all rights, that should have been the end. But then, of course, it wasn't. At precisely 3:12 p.m., the next afternoon, Fritz appeared in the office doorway holding a small tray. On it sat a teacup, a folded note, and Wolfe's unopened bottle of 1954 Moselle. I found this in the front vestibule, Fritz said, tone clipped. I raised a brow. No one rang the bell? Number this was left without announcement. Wolfe eyed the bottle, then the note. He unfolded the paper slowly, reading once, twice. Then he passed it to me. You arrested the wrong one. Look at the third glass. No signature, just like the last one. The words didn't rattle Wolfe, but the implication did, because now someone was correcting him. I pulled the old file. The photos from the Renshaw dinner, the wine tray, the 4 glasses, 1 full, 3 emptied. The police had tested the wine bottle. Arsenic had been found inside. Wolfe had assumed, correctly it seemed, that Henry's glass carried the fatal dose. But now someone was suggesting the truth sat in the untouched glass. I made a call to the precinct lab. Do me a favor, I said. You still have the Renshaw wine glasses? Sure, came the reply. Why? Retest the 4th one, the full glass, check for fingerprints, and double-check for poison. The man chuckled. You think the killer poured a glass they didn't drink? Just test it. Call me when you're done. I returned to Wolfe, who was once again in silent orbit around his thoughts. You think Greta was framed? I asked. Possibly, he murmured. More likely she was complicit, but not alone. That note, who would leave it unless they wanted us to keep digging? or to send us in the wrong direction. He sighed, stood, and began his slow waddle toward the plant rooms. Before vanishing, he said, "Go speak to Alice. And Carla. One of them knows the truth behind the third glass." I found Alice Renshaw in a private reading room at the New York Public Library, wearing black slacks and a turtleneck, like mourning was now part of her wardrobe. She was surrounded by old estate ledgers, dusty, brittle things her father probably would have torched if he'd known she'd ever find them. I sat beside her. "Something wrong?" she asked. "You tell me." I placed the anonymous note in front of her. She read it once, then looked away. "I didn't write that." "But you know who did." Silence. "You still have the typewriter?" I asked. She didn't respond. "Did you drink the wine that night?" That got her attention. Her gaze darted to me. I poured it. I asked if you drank it. A pause, then a whisper. "No," I nodded. "You poured 4 glasses. Henry's, your mother's, yours, and Greta's. But Greta didn't finish hers. Neither did you." She swallowed. "There's a theory," I said, "that Greta rinsed the glasses, but not yours." The third glass was full. Now her voice shook. "I poured it, but I didn't poison it." "You're sure?" "I'm not the killer. But maybe the killer thought you were." She turned sharply. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying someone poured that poisoned wine for you, and Henry drank it instead." I called Wolfe with the update. "She didn't drink the wine." "Expected." "And Greta?" "Still under guard. Kramer's waiting on final lab results." "You still think she was working with someone?" "Pfui," Wolfe muttered. "I think someone used her." I paid a visit to Carla Voss next. She was back in her apartment, nervous, sleep-deprived, and snapping pencils as if they were bones. Her Olympia typewriter sat on the desk, silent now. "Did you send another note?" I asked. She looked at me like I'd slapped her. "Another one?" I handed it over. Her face drained of color. "Number, I haven't left the house since the arrest." "Where were you the night before the dinner?" She blinked. I was home, reading. I didn't go near that house." "But you had reason. Henry rejected you. He silenced your story, that manuscript." "I wanted to publish it," she whispered, "but not this way." "Who else knew the contents?" "No one, not until Ava read it." "And Henry. And maybe—" She froze. "Maybe who?" She licked her lips. "There was someone else. Someone Charles trusted, a friend. I never saw his name in the manuscript, but I saw letters, typed letters. Signed only S. They met often discussed the estate, the legacy." "Can you find one of those letters?" She reached into her desk drawer, produced a thin, yellowed page. The typewriter's misaligned E confirmed the rest. I read, "You and I both know the family won't last. But if your daughter fails you, I'll ensure your legacy survives. My offer stands. S." Wolfe would want this. Back at the brownstone, I laid the letter before him. He read it once, folded it. Then he buzzed, "Fritz. Have Inspector Kramer return immediately and ask Miss Renshaw to join us at 7. "You figured it out?" I asked. "Yes," he said quietly. "And we must act quickly." "Why?" "Because there will be a third murder." At 6:59, everyone was seated. Kramer stood near the bookcase, arms crossed, glowering. Alice sat stiffly, eyes darting between Carla and Wolfe. Carla, for once, looked calm. And Wolfe. Wolfe rose. "This case has spiraled from a blackmail letter to 2 deaths, and nearly a third." He held up the anonymous note. "This," he said, "was meant for Alice." Murmurs. "She was supposed to drink the poisoned wine, but Henry, eager to assert dominance, picked first. He took her glass. He died." Kramer grunted. "We know that." No, Wolfe said. You know what happened. I am telling you why. He turned to Alice. Your father planned to cut Henry out, but also you. He intended to leave the estate to a mysterious ally, one S, a man who believed only he could protect the legacy. Wolfe pulled out the letter Carla had found. S was the executor, the confidant, the quiet hand behind the power. He turned to the room, and S is still here. Everyone froze. Wolfe pointed. To Samuel Delaney. Kramer blinked. Who the hell is... The office door creaked open. A man in a grey coat, balding, tall, entered. I invited him, Wolfe said. Samuel Delaney, former Renshaw estate lawyer. He looked around, then to Wolfe. You have no proof. Wolfe smiled grimly. I have the original correspondence. I have your fingerprints on the envelope dropped at our doorstep. And I have motive. Alice gasped. Delaney didn't move. You were promised the estate. You waited. And when Alice recovered the manuscript, you knew the promise was broken. You killed Ava to bury the truth. You used Greta to poison the glass meant for Alice. And now Delaney lunged. Kramer moved faster. 2 officers burst through the doorway. Delaney was cuffed. You'll never prove it, he snarled. Wolfe simply replied, I already have. Chapter 7. Legacy and Lies. The morning after Delaney's arrest, the brownstone was quieter than usual. Fritz didn't sing while he cooked. Wolfe skipped his morning beer. Even I waited longer than usual to wisecrack. The silence wasn't mourning, it was tension. The kind you feel when the curtain is about to rise on the last act, and no one knows how it ends. Wolfe sat at his desk, hands steepled, his gaze locked on the envelope containing Samuel Delaney's letter, the one that promised Charles Renshaw he'd protect the family legacy. It sat unopened, untouched since last night's drama. He didn't act alone, Wolfe said. I looked up from my notes. You think there's still another player? I don't think. I'm certain. He reached across the desk and tapped the edge of the typewritten note that had arrived with the Moselle bottle, the one that referenced the third glass. It had been designed to look like a clue, but Wolfe saw it differently. It wasn't meant to inform us. It was meant to provoke us, he said, to set Delaney up. You think someone framed him? Delaney acted, but not alone, and perhaps not even first. That turned the room colder. I stood, grabbed my coat, and said, Time to visit our wrongfully accused poisoner. Greta Schultz was being held in a modest cell downtown, her face puffy and voice small when I arrived. She'd been officially charged with Henry Renshaw's murder, but Wolfe had persuaded Kramer to delay processing until the final threads were tied. She didn't look like a killer, and to her credit, she didn't act like one either. Mr. Goodwin, she said, standing as I approached. Did you find the real one? Maybe. Depends on what you tell me. I took the chair across from her. Did you rinse all the glasses that night? Yes, after the doctor left, except... She stopped. Except what? I didn't rinse Alice's. Why not? Because she didn't drink from it. I wasn't sure if I should. That matched what Alice said. And the tray? Did anyone else handle it? Only me. I poured the rest into the sink. I swear. Were you following orders, Greta? Did someone ask you to prepare the table that night a certain way? She looked down. Mr. Delaney told me to use the older bottle. He said Mr. Henry wanted it specifically. Bingo. But Henry picked the bottle. He did, she said. But Delaney told me which rack to suggest. Subtle, too subtle for Greta, but not for a lawyer with long-term plans. I left her cell and made a call from the hallway. Wolfe answered on the first ring. Delaney set the scene, I told him. He manipulated the selection of the wine without touching it himself. Wolfe exhaled softly. Which means the poisoning began earlier than we thought, before the dinner even started. Return at once. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was already organizing files, not cluttered, just meticulous. Everything in its place, everything ready for the final meeting. But he paused long enough to ask, "What about the typewriter? Alice still hasn't handed it over." "Then fetch it." He said it with finality. Alice was waiting at the estate's parlour, sipping what looked like tea, but probably wasn't. She was composed, lips painted, and voice steady. "I assume you're here for the machine," she said, before I could speak. "You assume correctly." She led me upstairs to her father's old study. The room smelled of cedar and dried tobacco. There, beneath the window, stood the old Remington, covered by a silk scarf. Quiet. Innocent. Until you started pulling keys. "Is that the one you used to type the threat?" I asked. "No," she said. I turned to her. Her face was neutral, but her eyes weren't. "I didn't type that note." "You said you did." I lied. "Why?" She hesitated. "I thought if I confessed to the threat, you'd stop digging." "So who did write it?" She shook her head. "I don't know." I studied her carefully. "You're protecting someone." "I'm protecting what's left of my family." When I brought the typewriter back to the brownstone, Wolfe was waiting with a fresh sheet of paper and a ribbon cartridge. Together we typed a test line, the same smudged E, the same dropped T, the same match as the blackmail letter, but not the new threat. Wolfe nodded. "That confirms it. The blackmail letter was typed on this machine. The threat was not. That means someone else has another typewriter." He turned to me. "Find it." I started with the obvious, Carla Voss. But her Olympia didn't match. Clean typeface, no smudges, no alignment issues. Then I visited Delaney's townhouse. Kramer had secured the place and allowed me to search under Wolfe's request. I found nothing until I checked the upstairs study. In the back of a cedar wardrobe was a case, dusty, locked. I pried it open with a penknife. Inside was a royal arrow, a sleek, dark model with a faint oil smell, and worn keys. I carried it back for testing. Wolfe typed 3 lines. The third was a perfect match to the threat note. He planted the wine, set Greta up, typed the threat, I said. "But that still leaves one thing." Wolfe glanced up. "Why did he fail to kill Alice?" There was a pause. Then Wolfe said, "Because he didn't want her dead, he wanted her removed." Removed? As heir, if Alice had been implicated in Henry's death or frightened enough to flee, Delaney could have laid claim to the estate through a technical clause Charles had inserted. Default inheritance passes to the designated legal guardian in the event of familial collapse. Which was Delaney. I let out a low whistle. "So it wasn't just murder, it was a long game." "Yes," Wolfe said, "and now it's time to end it." That evening, Wolfe summoned everyone one last time. The final meeting, Kramer, Carla, Alice, Greta, brought in under guard, even Delaney in cuffs with a lawyer who looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. Wolfe stood. "Assembled guests," he began, "we have traversed blackmail, betrayal, and 2 murders, but even now the most critical truth has yet to be said aloud." He paced slowly. The typewritten threat delivered after Delaney's arrest did not come from Alice. It came from Delaney himself. Gasps. Carla gripped her chair. Alice blinked fast but said nothing. Wolfe continued. The typewriter was hidden in Delaney's home. The glass meant for Alice was positioned with surgical precision. He used Greta to stage the poisoning, used Ava's loyalty, and killed Henry to remove competition. Delaney snarled, "You can't prove any of this." Wolfe turned to Kramer. "I can, and I have. Fingerprints, typewriter analysis, Greta's testimony. And most damning, the rewritten will found in Delaney's safe, dated 2 weeks before Charles's death. A stunned silence settled over the room. Alice finally spoke. "So, my father gave it all to him?" "No," Wolfe said. "Delaney forged it, badly." Kramer stepped forward. "We're done here?" Delaney didn't argue. The cuffs clicked again. As he was led out, Wolfe turned to Alice. "You were never meant to inherit his cruelty. You chose differently." She didn't answer, but she didn't look away. Chapter 8. The Final Typewritten Line. The day after Samuel Delaney's arrest, the brownstone was uncharacteristically still. No threats arrived, no clients rang. Even Fritz, ever the punctual chef, seemed subdued as he prepared lunch, veal with sorrel sauce and a chilled bottle of Alsatian Riesling. Wolfe hadn't come down for breakfast. That usually meant two things. Either he was deep in thought or deeply annoyed. Turned out it was both. When he finally emerged from the plant rooms around 11, his shirt cuffs were crisp, his expression unreadable, and his appetite entirely absent. I slid the Gazette across the desk. Front page, lower fold, lawyer held in double murder, plot tied to Renshaw estate. No pictures, no flair, just a plain summary of what most readers would assume was a rich family's tragedy, another story in a city that never stops. Wolfe read it once, set it down and said, "We've reached the end, Mr. Goodwin, but the truth is not yet whole." I leaned back in the red armchair. "You think there's another body in the floorboards?" "Number. But there is one more truth to exhume." Before I could ask, the doorbell rang. It was Alice Renshaw. She wore black again, not mourning this time, armor. Her expression was composed, but her eyes were edged with something sharper than grief. I showed her in. Wolfe didn't rise. He simply gestured to the chair opposite his desk. "Miss Renshaw," he said, "thank you for coming." She folded her hands in her lap. "I assume this isn't a courtesy visit." "No," Wolfe said. "It is the completion of an unpleasant duty." She said nothing. "I owe you a truth," Wolfe said. "One that extends beyond the arrest of Mr. Delaney, beyond Ava Lyman and your brother." Her fingers tightened slightly. "Your father's manuscript was not just an account of sins, it was a ledger of control. Every name it contained was a hostage to his legacy. And when that ledger surfaced, it became a weapon. Delaney tried to wield it, Ava tried to sell it, Greta tried to suppress it. But you..." He paused. "You tried to burn it." Her voice was calm. "And failed." Wolfe nodded. "Because you didn't want to destroy it. You wanted to own it." The silence that followed was long. She didn't flinch, didn't deny it. "I had it in my hands," she said finally. "Everything he ever did, the proof, the power. I thought about burning it, but then I thought about what it could still do." "To protect or to punish?" Wolfe asked. "Both," she said, "depending on who came knocking." "You sent the first anonymous threat to yourself," Wolfe said. "To test us, to test me. You wanted to see who would come out of the shadows." I leaned forward. "But you didn't kill anyone?" "No," she said. "I didn't need to. They killed each other over what they thought I might do." "And Delaney?" "I suspected, but I couldn't be sure. Not until you confirmed it." I looked at Wolfe. "Why are we letting her sit here, not in handcuffs?" "Because," Wolfe said, "what she did was not a crime. It was a manipulation." He turned to Alice. "You are not innocent, but you are not guilty in a way the law recognizes." She stood. "What happens now?" "What idiot?" Wolfe folded his hands. "You are free to choose. You may publish the manuscript or seal it again, or destroy it. But you must live with the knowledge of what it represents and what it cost." Her eyes didn't waver. "Then I'll keep it, as a reminder and a warning." She turned to go. At the door, she stopped. "Thank you," she said, "for not making me a villain." Wolfe didn't reply. When the door closed behind her, I exhaled. "You sure she won't cause trouble?" "No," Wolfe said, "but she won't murder for it." He stood, stretched, and moved to his globe bar to pour a glass of beer. "You knew she typed the letter?" I said. "Yes." "And you let her lie?" "She needed to believe she had control. That is how she survived her father." I nodded slowly. "And the manuscript?" "It will stay with her," Wolfe said, "where it belongs, where it can do the least harm." Later that afternoon, I went down to the filing room. I opened a new manila folder, Renshaw estate case. Inside, I placed 3 items: a photo of Ava Lyman, still quiet, smiling faintly beside a typewriter she didn't know would get her killed; the forged will Wolfe had recovered from Delaney's safe; a photocopy of the final page of the manuscript, Charles Renshaw's signature, under the words, "History is not written by the victors. It is rewritten by the survivors." I closed the folder and slid it into the drawer. Another case done, another line typed. That night, as rain swept across the brownstone windows and Fritz served a dessert tart soaked in Armagnac, Wolfe lifted his fork, then paused. He said, "It was not my finest performance." I blinked. "You caught a killer, solved a blackmail mystery, and prevented a 3rd death." "Yes," he said, "but I allowed sentiment to cloud my precision." "You let her go." "I judged her motives greater than her methods." "Would you do it again?" He looked at me for a long moment. "Yes," he said. Then he ate,